What's up guys, it's Z here, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck of the Day. Today we have a zombie deck profile, a deck that I think has become a lot more relevant when the format changed because of cards like Dragon Buster Destruction Sword and Smoke Grenade getting banned, because the deck has a play that no other deck has, but being able to lock out of the extra deck or just sniping a specific card out of the hand was something that completely countered this. And I'm talking about Super Poly, because Super Poly is such a good card, especially in a deck that you can always have it live, and with stuff like Eldritch being very relevant right now, Super Poly can be live in this specific deck without even needing Zombie World on the field. So that's why I think this deck actually has the tools to compete in the meta right now. It's a very, very fun deck. It's a very good control deck that can fit a lot of hand traps in. So stick with me for this deck profile. We're going to discuss the deck, how it's supposed to be played. You can change some stuff here and there, but I'm going to show you the skeleton of how you should play the deck. So before we begin with the deck profile, give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and now let's get to the video. So to start off with the monsters, we have 2 copies of Doom King Ballardrock, a very good boss monster, something that recurs itself every single standby phase, so it's very easy to get this to the grave with Unizombie and Gozuki. And this is the monster that interrupts your opponent. You can play stuff like Dragoon if you want in this deck, but it limits the plays of the deck because of cards like Globe Bloom that get you to Ballardrots, so you really need to get to Ballardrots ASAP, so this is why you cannot really fit other stuff in here, except for maybe a generic Needle Fiber or something like that. 2 copies of Necroworld Banshee, she gets you to your Zombie World. The reason this card is better than people give it credit for is because of her second effect. If you have her on the field for a while, then you can just protect your Zombie World, and 1800 attack is nothing to be it's nothing to be ashamed of, because it's a monster that can stick on the field because of its high attack. Your opponent needs to deal with it if they want to deal with Zombie World, and some decks cannot even play with Zombie World on the field. So this is why using the first one to get to Zombie World and having the second one on the field sometimes to protect your Zombie World is very important. And if they find a way to get rid of your Zombie World, the second one can trigger even from the field to get another copy of itself. So basically you can get Zombie World on the field permanently, and this is how you win games, either by disrupting your opponent through Zombie World's actual effect, or using Super Poly in combination with Zombie World to disrupt your opponent's plays. For the starters, play 3 copies of Unizombie, 3 copies of Solitaire. These 2 go in together. You need to max out on both of them. I've seen people cut numbers, but I think even if you draw multiples of them, it's not really a problem. They're just fodder for Jack O'Bolan to discard. And I'd rather see more than one than not seeing any. And this is why I think you need to max out. And I played 2 copies of Gozuki just to make it to 8 starters, because you need a normal summon, and 8 might sound like a lot, but like I said, zombies, they can act as discard fodder. Super Poly also needs a discard, so you don't really mind. And even if you do not summon Gozuki and you discard it for something, it still has a grave effect that helps you special summon a monster from the hand. So if you have a Bloom in your hand that you cannot really discard, if you have a Ballardrock, then you can just special summon them from the hand with Gozuki's second effect. So it's a card that doesn't really become dead even if you have another normal summon. Because if you have Gozuki and Unizombie, then obviously you'd rather summon your Unizombie or your Solitaire, but still there are some scenarios where the only normal summon in my hand is Gozuki, so this is why I decided to play 2 copies of this. 3 copies of Mizuki. Ever since Jack O'Bolan came out, I think you need to max out on this. You could play 2 copies before because it was kind of a brick if you had it in your hand, unless you had a Unizombie, but Unizombie sometimes you wanted to send maybe the Bloom from your hand and Banshee from your deck so you could get to Ballardrots this way, or vice versa. But still now, with Jack O'Bolan, you have another way to discard Mizuki turn 1, so you can use its effect to get more extenders in the grave. 3 copies of Jack O'Bolan. This card is insane, this format. This card, it disrupts your opponent's grave. It's like playing 3 more copies of Diddy Crow, especially with stuff like Eldritch and Dinosaur being so popular, especially Eldritch, because if you just banish Eldritch from the grave, then that's pretty much it. You can do the same with Misk. So this card, even if you leave it on the field without using it any for link material for maybe Psyker or Avenger Savior, then you can just use this as a disruption, which is a really, really good card. And the extender part is insane, because not only can it special summon itself to the field, but you can also pitch cards that you obviously want in the grave, because this deck does not need cards in the hand. You want to send pretty much everything to the grave. So if you have like a Bloom, a Banshee, or maybe a Mizuki, you just want to discard them. So this is why this card is absolutely insane in this deck. And 1 copy of Vampire Fräulein, just for the option. This card doesn't come up too often, but there are some scenarios where you just want to beat down your opponent. You don't want to play more than 1 because it's not something you really want to draw. You have to make sure that this card can actually get through monsters with a lot of attacks. So if you draw it and you don't have anything else, then you have to wait for an attack in order to special summon itself, and it's not the best card right now, but still it's something something you can search with Bloom, so playing 1 copy is perfectly fine just for the option. 2 copies of Glow Bloom. This is a card that actually limits the plays of the deck a little bit, just because when you use its effect, you can actually summon only zombies for the rest of this turn. So you cannot really actually use something like this for an Anaconda and then use its effect to get a Battle Droid and then use Anaconda's effect for Dragoon. Unfortunately, you cannot do that. Otherwise, an engine like Dragoon would be very optimal for the deck. You can send Ballardrock instead of sending this and then going to something like that, but then you will need another extender in order to get to the 2 monsters you need on the field, maybe something like a Mizuki or a Jacobolan. But still, I think this card is too good to not play in the deck just because you want to fit in another engine like Dragoon. And this card also searches your level 5 or higher monsters, which play 2 more monsters other than Ballardrock, so this card has a lot of utility. For the hand traps, play 3 copies of Ash Blossom. Ash, I think, is the only hand trap that you have to play in this format, because depending on the type of locals you go or the format you know that you're going to face, you can switch around the rest of the hand traps, but I think Ash is so generic right now that you have to play her. Play 3 copies of Didicro and 3 copies of Skullmeister. These 2 are the ones that counter the most relevant decks right now, but if you know that you're in a format where a lot of people are playing Dragoon and they don't play a lot of meta, then you can switch these around for Veilers and Impermanences. If you know you're going to play against a lot of combo, then you can main Nibiru. So these 6 slots are pretty much interchangeable to whatever feels you. You can play Gamma if you know you're playing against combo as well. It's really good, but I think Gamma is a little bit underwhelming against stuff like Eldritch. Same with Impermanent Veiler. So this is why if you're going to play against the meta, these 6 hand traps are here just to counter that, because countering your opponent's grave is also really good. Ghost Bell is another option, but I'm not really a big fan of Ghost Bell. I'd rather play Skullmeister and Didicro. If you can fit Ghost Bell instead of Ash, then something you can do as well if you know you're going to be playing only against Eldritch. But I still think Ash is so good even against Eldritch, because if you just destroy your opponent's chance to summon an Eldritch from the deck with Scarlet Sanguine, then all of the disruption traps are dead. So this is why I think it's such a good card. For the spells, play 2 copies of Zombie World. You don't really need to max out on Zombie World because it's so easy to access, and if you have an access to Banshee and you have a Zombie World in your hand, that's basically dead because you cannot really do something, and you don't want to get Banshee on the field too early because that means you're wasting a normal summon on her. You actually want to do this turn 2 onwards. So this is why I think playing 3 copies of Zombie World can actually be bricky, because you can get access to it very easily, and you'd rather have other cards in your hand that can actually give you a play or disrupt your opponent rather than having dead copies of a field spell. Play a lot of one-off spells in the deck. First one is Foolish Burial. Of course, this is a zombie deck. You need to send something to the grave always. 1 Instant Fusion. I really like this card because, unfortunately, this is a deck that actually gets worse the more grave disruption hand traps are in the meta. And with stuff like Didicro and Skullmeister being relevant right now and Ghost Bill, you need to be able to stop stuff. And this Instant Fusion is actually something that helps you combo off as well as give you more disruptions, but I'll get it out of the extra deck. 1 copy of 1 for 1, because Bloom is so important. Also, discarding another monster from the hand is always nice with the deck. 1 Monster Reborn, you just need to get a monster back from the grave. If your opponent stops maybe something like your Gozuki, if you have another extender to maybe send your Unizombie to the grave with your Jacobolan, that you can Monster Reborn back that Unizombie that you can get another monster. 1 Call by the Grave, because you need to stop as many hunters as possible. And 3 copies of Super Poly. This is the most reliable win condition of the deck because it's such a good card. Even if you don't have a Zombie World in the field, when you're playing against Eldritch, they're all zombies, so you can just use them for another soul with just Super Poly. Of course, I play other targets as well, which I'll talk about once I get to the extra deck. Now, for the extra deck, we play 2 copies of Drake on Nether Soul. This card is absolutely insane because it's such a good card combination with Zombie World. It just gives a reliable Super Poly pretty much against anything, and when you just fuse away 2 monsters in a slower format like this one, then it just is pretty much enough to stop your opponent's turn. Against Virtual World, if you just do this, then they can't do anything else. And this monster is really powerful because it's a 3k body that gives you even more power on the field when you just use its effect for the token, so you can get more attack points on the field, so it's a really, really good card. 1 copy of Starving Venom and 1 copy of Mud Dragon, and these 2 are here in case you don't have access to Zombie World and you're not playing against Eldritch, so you want to cover more areas with just being able to use Super Poly against other matchups. If you know you're going to be playing against other stuff, then you can just, of course, put in the extra deck cards like Earth Golematic Nister or maybe Dragostapeli if you know you're going to play against stuff like Pendulum or Cybers. It pretty much depends on what you're going to face, but if you do not know what you're going to face and you want to cover the most generic variety of decks, then these 2 monsters are basically what you need to play. For the Instant Fusion targets, I play 1000 Eyes Restrict and 1 Millennium Eyes Restrict. Especially this Millennium Eyes Restrict is so good in this deck because of Zombie World. When you make this a zombie in the graveyard, you can bring it back with Mizuki to have an extra disruption on the field. So on top of being able to counter hand traps when you draw this 1 Instant Fusion, you can actually get 1 more interruption. So this is why this card is really good. And 1000 Eyes Restrict, of course, because it's something that is much better going second than going first on Millennium Eyes, because you just bait disruptions with it. For the Synchro monsters, play 1 copy of Cyframe Lord Omega. You don't really want to do this combo really early, especially if you have something like a Bloom in your hand. But if the only thing you have is a Solitaire, then you can do the good old play with the one card Omega to take a card of your opponent's hand, but this is in a scenario where you've drawn absolutely nothing of a combo other than having a Solitaire. Maybe you've drawn like a bunch of hand traps and a Solitaire, then this is the play you're going to be going for, because if you cannot send both Bloom and Banshee or both Banshee and Balrog to the grave, then the combo doesn't really work because you don't have a field spell on the field. So this is why this card is here. And also there's another reason, because you play one copy of Formula Synchron and one copy of Sun Saga. So these two give Needle Fiber a really good disruption board, because now Needle Fiber is not more of a combo piece, it's more of like an engine piece that actually uses its second effect to get a tuner synchro on the field. So you need to use these to be able to go into Sun Saga, and you can actually use Omega because of Zombie World, because it'll make Omega a zombie, but you can use Balrog as well, so you don't really have to summon Omega first. But if you have access to Omega first, then you can actually pop 2 cards with Sun Saga instead of 1, but even popping 1 card makes Sun Saga really good, and also this Formula Synchron will give you another draw, so you can replace the card you went to use the Synchro Summon, and then next turn your Balrog will come back on the field, so it's not like you negged anything, and you have a monster that's basically Return from the Dragon Lord by banishing a Shurenui monster from the grave for all the zombies, and Solitaire is in the deck, so you can actually use its effect very, very consistently. For Link monsters, play 1 copy of Anima. This is much better than Linkuriboh, so you don't really need to play Linkuriboh anymore ever since this card came out, because you wanted a level 1 Link in order to be able to use Bloom in case you had to normal summon it, because there are a lot of scenarios where I just activate Zombie World and summon a Bloom, link it away to go for a Balrog. Yes, this happens a lot, and then you can go for a Vampire Psyker. So this card is much better because it does everything that Linkuriboh does and does more going second, so that's why this card is so good. And you don't really need to use this other than turn 1, because there's the argument that you can use Linkuriboh's effect from the grave again to tribute the Bloom that you'll summon afterwards, because once you have access to 1 Balrog, you don't really need to do this again, because it will keep coming back as long as you have the field spell on the field. For Link 2s, play 1 copy of Vampire Psyker and 1 copy of Avenger Savior. These two are the zombie Link 2s. These cards are both really good. The Vampire Psyker is the one that you want to summon when going first. Avenger Savior is the one you want to summon going second, because you can just stack with it, then send another zombie from the deck to the grave, so you can get access to more combo pieces. These cards are both necessary in the deck. You can play more copies of Vampire Psyker if you really want to, but I think like just summoning 1, you don't really need to go into it during the late game, because the late game is won by just keep bringing back Balrog and keep bringing back more resources in order to go for higher links than this. 1 copy of Needle Fiber, insane card in this deck. It's not that as good as it used to be in pretty much everything, but in this deck it's actually really, really good because of 2 reasons. First, Bloom is a tuner monster, so you can summon from the field very, very easily, and then you can use its second effect, like I said, with Formula Synchron to go into Sun Saga, so it has synergy that helps you enable your combos and also give you more disruptions of the field, so this card makes this deck function a lot more smoothly. 1 copy of Unicorn, because of Needle Fiber it's very easy to link climb, so you can use this going second to go into Needle Fiber for Bloom to Unicorn, then spin a card and then use Bloom's effect. And 1 copy of Appaloosa, because it's very easy to spam with Needle Fiber, and when you're going first, if you can get a Needle Fiber on the field, maybe you have a Jacobolan or you sent a Mizuki to the grave, you can just end on Appaloosa and then have Balrog come back during the opponent's standby phase, so you have a lot of interruptions. And actually, Balrog can protect the Appaloosa, because your opponent will usually try to normal summon something to get rid of Appaloosa once she's used one of her negates, but then Balrog can banish that monster, so your opponent has nothing to attack Appaloosa with. So yep, that's the deck, guys. It's a really fun deck. I think it's coming back to the format because we can actually use the extra deck again because of the Banlist. It's a very slow-paced format, it's a very control-based format, so this is the format that deck like this can thrive. Against combo decks, it couldn't really do much because it can't really fit so many insane hand traps. Like if you had like 1 hand trap against combos, then it was never enough, but you had like 2 more and then have a play. So this is why the deck is really good now compared to what it used to be in the previous formats. So yep, that's the deck, guys. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and we'll see you next time.